Yep.
How do I send it to you? Do you have
I have an email.
email?
Yep. And it'll be andrew.forestry@yahoo.com.
Okay. YouTube link. Here is this. I just sent it to you.
Hey, Mike. Not too bad. We're getting everything set up.
Well, do you want to come take a look, Jenny?
Yeah.
How it looks?
Okay.
Here, let me put up something. I'll put up words.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
There's a bunch of words.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there's no rush. Yeah, well. Okay. I see it. It's turned on to the edge now.
Okay, yeah, that should be. Oops. Crap.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Does it?
Uh-huh.
I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
when I do that, I think it takes some of the screen off.
Here, can I sign you into the...
Yeah.
Sign you into your...
The YouTube?
Yeah, it seems to work fine with the lights all on too, doesn't it?
Yeah, Firewise. So it's copperriverfirewise@gmail.com,
Okay.
and then the password is 12345 Copper River, like this, with capital C and capital R.
Write all that stuff down.
Mhm.
And then, what's
And
the-
I put the name as you, Jenny. You own this account, but see here.
So what's
So
the...
you don't have a YouTube channel, but if you just click on this
Okay, so Copper River Firewise.
at gmail.com.
Okay. Firewise at...
gmail.com,
Okay.
and then the password is 12345,
Mm-hmm.
and then Copper River with capital C and capital R.
Are there spaces or anything?
No.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, you can't add a space.
Okay. Yeah, and all
Oh,
these
yeah.
are no spaces.
Yeah.
Oh, is there capitals too on
It
this?
doesn't matter. It's actually,
For the Gmail, okay.
yeah, it doesn't matter if you put it there or not. It's not sensitive to you. So this is your YouTube channel now, which you can always access when you sign into your Gmail account. You will have this little
Mm-hmm.
thing there, which is different here, but you will find YouTube there. And then when you click on your channel, see that this is already happening here. So, and it has a lag. It's like
Yeah,
fast, then it's like it's later.
and it's just a...
I hate listening to myself.
I know, so do I.
And there's a chat, so people can chat here.
Where is it?
It's right here.
Okay.
And you can be replying to them here. I named your YouTube
Great.
account Copper Firewise.
Okay.
So you can reply here.
Or we'll read them at the end, we'll read them aloud and answer the
Yeah, and you
questions.
can just start it up.
Okay. I won't actually sign out of this one. I'm going to sign in.
You can keep it signed in too.
I'm going to sign in my...
It doesn't matter, you can sign into as many devices as you wish to.
Okay.
Yeah, or have like multiple tabs
I
or
would
something
go-
as long as the...
I would rather just keep it open just in case.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go switch my laundry real quick,
Okay, yeah.
and I'll leave this
Let's
here.
see, are you gonna stop the live?
No, just
You're gonna leave it and we can, whatever.
You know what? Actually, we should pause it.
Okay. We don't need a lot, but we gotta be It's fine if it's like people, but just that we had a meeting. Yeah. People. We didn't know that documentary. Oh, that's okay, no.
That's what I do.
Okay,
Yeah, I didn't think
You
it
don't
was
see my
you.
voice. We're us that way.
No, wait, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want coffee?
How you doing?
Hey,
Hey, how you
doing
doing?
this.
Wesley,
Hey, my wife. Or pie.
Rock, sure.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I do. It's nice to meet you in person.
I think that's live. Oh, so
So it's,
Put the-
I just put it on so it's live now.
Working on it, it's insulated up and.
No need to worry.
And
Yeah, I guess we'll start talking about time.
so today, while I was, fire.
He is.
Oh, that's good too, he's undercover.
Back to the house. Yeah, and, I was over there.
Oh, so that's fine, you know about.
You showed me everything. Route, the taxidermy, all that stuff there. Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, so while I was going, I was on credits and put the plywood and all of this ceiling on outside on the shop side.
Now that,
And before, the downstairs living area is like 60 degrees, 80, and it was 75 degrees. And I'm like, this is
Good.
probably 90.
Yeah.
Let's see, been a while. I know, it's been forever. Are you still taking college classes?
This semester I didn't. No,
Yeah, it's a little bit of progress.
I'm homeschooling my daughter in working, so I didn't do any classes this year.
Yeah.
Something forward, yeah.
I skipped two.
Something.
I didn't take anything this year, or this semester either. There's way too much going on.
Guys,
Pretty good, yourself? Yeah. Say what I know and then offer up for it.
How you doing,
yeah. Can't feel that way you just, I'll get arrested.
Welcome, Leslie.
Where?
Just signing it. Can you, also,
I could on fire.
is the concern from your place?
Yeah.
We'll be able to see how many people are on live.
Yeah, you can see how many people are
On
watching.
both the YouTube.
You will be able to see on YouTube. Like I can tell you right now, there's 10 people watching right now.
How many?
10.
10?
That's where you
our properties are here. Kevin lives right there.
Hey Mike, did you bring a cord here?
Yeah.
You got a light on.
You call Cutler, Kevin.
My dad has a crappy battery, so that could be a problem. I'll go tend to that real quick.
Get mine first too.
He was getting here with his speech, yeah, that's it, can you see it? started in just about 1 minute.
Yeah, that could have been bad.
Yeah, pretty like a freak. Somebody's got a flag. Yeah. Like, I put a brand new American flag on it.
Yep.
All right, I think we're ready, folks. Good evening. Real quickly, before we get going, we're trying to do this live streaming as well. I think we have 10 or so folks watching on live at this point. But I think what we'll do real quick before Jenny goes into the presentation is just let's do introductions here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mike Turner. I'm the Fire Management Officer for the state, for the Valdez Copper River area. And if you're here representing an agency, please just, say so and what your interest is in this program. We'll go around the room real quickly. Go ahead.
Okay. Jenny Mosier, I know most of you in this room. I work for both Tok and Valdez Copper River area forestry. I'm a wildland fire resource technician. I live here in the Kenny Lake area, and fire prevention and advocacy for it is something that I think is really important.
My name is Andrew Coulter. I work out of the Copper River Division of Forestry office, technician out of that office for about 6 years.
I'm Katie Finnis and I work with Wildfire Incorporated. So I'm here in attendance to just see how you guys are going through the CWPP and how you're going to include different landowners. And as a personal resident for the Willow Loop area, I'm also interested to see what kind of work you guys are going to be doing. Kelly Smith, longtime resident of the Copper Basin area, also on the volunteer fire department.
John Trucknock, a member of the Kenny Lake Fire Department and Board, and we're just interested in always maintaining the safety we can for our citizens here, and welcoming what you have to offer today.
Jeff Ramstow, live here in Kenny Lake, and part of the fire department here.
Rusty Gordon, part of the Kenny Lake Volunteer Department. Go ahead, Brad.
I was going through, can you jump in? Brad Kimberlin, and this is Maureen, although she can't speak for herself. We serve on the lead board in the fire department.
Darlene Wright, local resident.
Came back, Dr. So local resident.
Marcia Bashang, local resident.
Pete Bashang, local resident.
John Lenhart, I manage the Land and Resources Department for Otna. I came for the stickers. Thanks, Mike.
Back there in the corner, you're not gonna escape.
Yeah, my name is Ben Seifert. I work for the Alaska Fire Service, and I'm part of the overarching CWPP plan for Copper River.
Melinda Miller, local resident.
And people that are trickling in, feel free to just come in and take your seat. This is a collaborative effort here. Really, the funding came through the BLM, the local BLM field office, and an opportunity that came really to my attention a couple of years ago when we started working with BLM. Tim Skiba, and he's the forester in the local Glen Allen field office. And we started working through this process, so we're really happy to be here where we're at. This is our first community that we're taking a stab at, on this round. I think we'll just leave it to Jenny to go into the.
Yeah, so go ahead, Pete.
I got somebody on here that says they can't hear. They can see us, but they can't hear.
Okay.
Are they on Facebook or
Yeah,
YouTube?
Facebook.
They should be able to hear if they click on the link to the YouTube.
I'll tell her.
Okay. The test that we did before is we had success. So, and then with that in mind, a note for the folks who are watching online, who hopefully are hearing me right now, there is an option if you have.
You can type them in the chat windows, both on our page and on the YouTube channel that we're streaming on. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll answer those questions. So, a couple housekeeping things. Thank you to the DUA Community League for offering up this space for us to have this meeting here. The bathrooms are currently out of water break or order, so sorry that's not an option. There are outhouses behind the building with entrance security. And I also want to thank Carolina, Prince Williamstown College, for being here and helping us with our live stream event, and the Copper River School District who provided the camera that Carolina's using. And then again, thank all of you for taking time out of your evening to come here and show interest in better protecting our community and being prepared in the event of wildfires. So with that, I put together a presentation to go through that basically goes through the parts of
Community Wildfire Protection Plan, otherwise known as a CWPP, and my hope is by going through this that we'll have a better understanding of what creating a plan entails and then the potential benefits that it can bring to the community. And then a side note is, it may be of interest to some of you that almost all the background pictures in this presentation are fires from the Copper River area. So a little background information about the Copper River Basin. Our fire management area is 1.5 million acres and includes over 20 communities, and we exist within a fire-dependent ecosystem that naturally burns. The Alaska Division of Forestry is the responsible agency for fire suppression in our area. We have agreements with the National Park Service. So we do provide fire protection on federal lands and native lands. But of course, we rely heavily on local cooperators, interagency partners, and our volunteer fire departments to assist in providing protection and resources during the fire season. And little check-in, how's everything going all right with the technology?
Some little sound issue with the folks online, so they're catching up.
Okay, I know there is a delay also, so.
It was good for a minute and then it went bad.
It's just not super loud, but if I make it louder, then it gives feedback. So I just made it a little bit quieter, but people can just turn up their volumes.
Okay, would it be beneficial to talk louder?
Maybe.
Is it echoing? Can everyone in the room hear okay?
Okay, it's back to normal now.
Okay, so. All right, so continuing on, I just want to make sure everyone gets the full benefit. So, what exactly is a CWPP or a Community Wildfire Protection Plan? Well, it's a document that we create in collaboration with emergency management, land management agencies, community organizations, and of course individual community member input. And it allows the community to be proactive in managing wildfire risk. The plan also consists of individualized community assessment that identifies values, risks, elements of community protection already in place, and an action plan and measures that can be taken to reduce the threat and impact of wildfires. What a CWPP can provide for us is that they empower the public to be proactive in wildfire prevention and protection. They confirm our VFD importance and can back future funding efforts. Improve collaboration and effectiveness of local fire suppression resources and community preparedness. And then once we have a CWPP in place, Wildland Urban Interface, also known as WUI grants, can be obtained to meet the goals of the mitigation and the action parts of the CWPP. So these are all the communities that we have have identified for creating a CWPP. These are communities that we are going to update and revisit their existing CWPPs. Right now, the current boundary for this CWPP, and that's why we're kind of calling it the Kenny Lake area, or Kenny Lake, Willow Lake, Upper and Lower Tonsina, is it extends as far north as mile 98 on the Richardson Highway. We wanted to include the egg parcels there. On the Edgerton, it is extended out to just past the Tonsina, the Lower Tonsina Bridge, about mile 22, and then one of the southern boundary on the Richardson Highway, we're still sort of grappling with a little bit and taking input on. We currently have it set around mile 62, although we're looking at extending it to even 58, but there's some communities down in Teakle and Stewart Creek that are also interested in being part of the CWPP or having one created for that area. So we're looking at how we're going to address that right now. So the minimum requirements to create a CWPP includes collaboration with emergency management, land management agencies, tribal entities, and community members. It prioritizes areas for fuel reduction, and it will recommend measures to create defensible space and reduce structure ignitability in event of a wildfire. And I just wanted to put in a little slide on what defensible space is, because you kind of hear it come up a lot. We don't want to use terminology that people are unfamiliar with, but basically it's a buffer that we want to create between your buildings and flammable vegetation that surrounds it. Not only does it help prevent your protect the structure in event of a wildfire, but it also provides for a safer location for firefighting resources to take a stand against a wildfire, and it's basically essential to improve the chance of your house surviving a wildfire. And I included the picture down in the bottom. You can see how that there's an area cleared. The forest does not go directly up to the house, and so that's an example of defensible space.
How much distance do you figure is a defensible space?
Well, we have certain standards that basically under Firewise or best practice methods that we look at, but there's different zones. There's a 10-foot zone around your house where basically you want all flammable material removed. Then you have a 100-foot zone where you're going to be looking at thinning trees and carefully choosing what kind of vegetation you have, and then a 300-foot zone where you really want to have at least a 10-foot or more tree spacing at the crown. So.
Okay, well, I got problems that way because when we built, my wife wanted to live in the woods. And some of it's going to be nearly impossible to take down. We've been working on it, but.
Yeah,
I've
and it
got
all
10 feet
depends
on
too,
almost
you know, on
everything.
the type of trees and vegetation, and there's a variety of solutions to that can at least help increase the defensibility.
You know, to just get my head around it.
Yeah.
Take care of that.
There's not one cut and set way. There's a lot of different ways to approach it. So, these are basically all the components in the written document of a CWPP, and I'm going to go through some of the slides just so you kind of have an idea of what goes into it. So, basically a CWPP starts with the executive summary, which is a summary of the findings that addresses the collaborative efforts involved in creating the plan. It clarifies protection of life, property, and critical infrastructure through prioritized fuel reduction, and then it addresses hazardous fuel findings and mitigation measures. Collaboration should include involvement of local, state, and federal government and tribal agencies, community members, groups, community organizations, and any interested parties, and then emergency services, including local fire departments. The next section, or another section in the plan, is the community profile. So this is basically statistical information concerning the population census. Of course, we want to define the boundaries for the CWPP. It's a general breakdown of the homes, community buildings, businesses, industry, and infrastructure. Basically the values at risk that we want to protect, and cultural sites, natural resources, things that are important to the community, and notable hazards. The emergency preparedness section addresses government agencies responsible for fire suppression and the resources available and approximate response times for those resources. It addresses local volunteer fire department resources and mutual aid resources, escape routes and egress in event of evacuation, and safety zone locations where people can gather if their property is threatened by wildfire. And so basically, just to define that a little bit, a safety zone would be a location that is ideally predetermined so that if a community is being threatened by wildfire and people are evacuated, it is a destination we can tell people to go, where they can gather and they can quickly receive updates and news on what's going on until that situation gets stabilized. And then of course the escape routes and egress is, we look at basically how many highways do we have coming in and out of our communities, or how many roads do we have coming out of our neighborhoods, or could those get cut off, and what would we do if, say, an access to a neighborhood got cut off? So those are the types of things that we're looking at and talking about there. So the community risk assessment is really getting into the nuts and bolts of the CWPP. It's based off of the availability of hazardous fuels creating a threat to the values at risk in event of the wildfire. So things that are going to be looked at in the risk assessment is we'll be looking at satellite imagery, vegetation and fuel classification maps of the area, clusters of houses and neighborhoods, road access, infrastructure, and analyzing all of that with adjacent fuels and the risk that it might cause if those fuels were ignited. And of course, it also includes community input on concerns and preparedness. The mitigation plan basically takes the information from the risk assessment and it puts it in an outline of goals and priorities of values to be protected, and so it has objectives that determine specific measures that can be taken to lower the risk to the community, and it also includes measures that can be applied both to private lands and public lands. And then that's followed up by an action plan, which describes the recommendations of projects and actions that meet the goals and objectives of the mitigation plan. So likely things in an action plan are site-specific fuel reduction and Firewise efforts that focus on creating defensible space and reducing home ignitability. Education and community outreach. We want to empower the public to be proactive in wildfire prevention and protection. And then it'll also include ways to improve collaboration and effectiveness of local fire suppression resources. And then of course we're going to look at the fire history of our area also, past fires, which will help generate a greater understanding of the risks and hazards associated with wildfires. And then at the end of the plan, once we've had multiple meetings and determined what our hazards were and come up with possible solutions that could improve the situation, we of course want to have signatures from people that are involved. So Those would be the government agencies that were involved, any tribal entities that were involved, the fire department, which is hopefully involved, community groups such as the Community League, if they want to take part in the planning process, and any other community groups, and contributing parties. So the potential benefits to the community, once a CWPP is established, usually come from obtaining the Wildland Urban Interface, or the WUI grants, which will help support future funding for these programs. So those potential benefits would be Firewise programs, shaded fuel breaks if prescribed, development of biomass utilization programs, designated wood debris disposal sites, funding to support VFD needs, and whatever the community deems practical for addressing wildfire concerns. Funding for these grants, basically for us to write the community wildfire protection plans that we're working on right now in our Copper River Basin communities. We are partnered with the Bureau of Land Management Glen Allen Field Office, and it is a federal grant, so we're working with them to make that happen. After we get a plan in place, typically more grants will be applied for that will help us do those programs and potential action and mitigation actions that I talked about. And if you go back in time, how this all came about is the National Fire Plan in 2000 and the Healthy Forest Restorations Acts of 2003 were created in response to the increasingly intense and devastating wildfires the last couple of decades, especially in the western United States. And so that's how these programs such as these WUI or Wildland Urban Interface grants are available. And so funding's available to better address management of fire-prone ecosystems where we live, which includes us, commonly referred to as the Wildland Urban Interface. So these are some sites that if you want to get some more information, you can go to forestry.alaska.gov/fire/CWPP, or we have a section on Firewise where you can look at Firewise community, Firewise standards, or other CWPPs in other communities if you go to the CWPP site. Or really, if you just Google Alaska Firewise, it's going to be really informational. There's a lot of resources available specific to our Alaska communities and challenges that we face up here that can provide more information for you. And that basically leaves us with the questions portion.
Do you want to put it back to the links?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
What do you think about burning slash in the winter? Like you cut a bunch of trees and you have all the brush from it. Is that an appropriate thing, or would you rather see that it was hauled like the gravel pit? I know some stuff has been disposed of in the gravel pit down here by the well and firehouse over the years. I'm just wondering.
Well, burning slash is a totally acceptable way to get rid of debris. The things that I would suggest you look at when you're burning it is how big your piles are and what sort of clearances you have around your piles. Mm-hmm. Usually you want about 3 times the pile height distance from the pile to any sort of other, trees or vegetation. Right. I wouldn't make the piles any bigger than you need to unless you have equipment available, because if you start a fire, you are responsible for putting it out.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
But usually when I burn slash, I start a fire and then put it on one branch at a time.
That's a very good method for burning debris. And during the winter is a great time especially when, you know, conditions are really stable and there's not high winds expected, and we have frozen ground, and then you can just ensure that that ash pit doesn't burn down into the ground and that it's out before spring,
Right,
you know, just by mixing it up.
yeah, okay. I don't have very much, soil that's combustible, I'm pretty well. I think it was burned over about 40 years ago, or somebody told me that, so, yeah, okay.
Do WUI grants, would they cover uninhabited, culturally significant dwellings, if you will, or just inhabited spaces?
Yeah, they can include cultural relevant sites out there. They're scored in state, and then all the western ones are added together and scored, so it's fairly competitive. And the highest scores go when you're kind of doing a combination of urban interface, fuels reduction, education, outreach, and that sort of thing.
Okay, because I guess what I'm thinking about is that the old Copper Center Village right across from Copper. It's one thing we're concerned about.
Yeah, that would definitely be something we could put into the Copper Center or the Clutica, or kind of trying to sort that one out a little bit still, I guess, when we get to it. But yeah, it would definitely come under that.
I have a question. This is in regard to the funding. So is the funding something that happens every so often, or is that like the ones that are already identified with the CWPP, like Kennecott, do they have a funding program every year to keep that going, the ones that have already been identified? Or do you just get funding one time like this year and then you start the program and then that's it for a few years and then you come back when, how regular is the funding, I guess, for these kinds of programs? Is it an ongoing annual thing, or is it kind of?
No, it's as it's applied for. So, for example, I'll just take McCarthy Kennecott, for example. We did the CWPP out there, probably that got finalized, what, 2010?
2011.
Something like that, you know, roughly around there, right after the Chackanaw fire. And part of that, we took the CWPP and then we wrote a WUI grant to that community for $300,000 to go do defensible space, you know, on private property, access egress improvements, shaded fuel breaks, things of that nature out there that the community identified as what they wanted to see happen. And they became, as part of that, they became a Firewise community, nationally recognized. And part of that is on the community to do annually, once a year, they have to do an event and upkeep, you know, they have to upkeep what they already did.
To be Firewise?
Yeah, to remain a Firewise community. So once a year they do a community event and where they go maybe cut brush and, you know, neighbors' yards and haul it away or whatever to maintain that currency. So there is some expectations that you don't have to stay current, but
is there any advantage, like insurance, for home insurance if you're a Firewise community?
I might add on to that though, that we can still apply Firewise efforts and defensible space in our community without being a Firewise community. It's an effort that, you know, individual landowners take on after, you know, we try to provide those resources to allow them to make it happen. But, you know, as many people as we can affect, the more it's going to help the greater community. But you don't have to actually be labeled a Firewise community to still have the benefits of people Firewise.
Okay. I had one other question. How much time between now and, say, the implementation of this plan? What are you looking at, like a year, 2 years? How long does it usually take when you start talking to the community?
so this is just going to be the framework, the basic plan. So any feature, any other fuels grants, or that might be applied for in support of these projects identified. We're really identifying the needs and concerns and projects here in this phase of it.
Okay.
So and that would not necessarily be Division of Forestry applying to do that. That could be anybody. It could be Aetna, it could be,
Okay, I see. All right.
it could be the fire department, or, it could be a number of different organizations out there. It doesn't necessarily, we're just doing the framework so that's there, and then folks can apply that have the workforce and capability to do that, can do that at will after that, And we may put in some grants to do some of those identified projects, but right now, we just want to hear from the community, what are your concerns, so that we can put that framework together. That's really basically it.
Well, my concern is we have one road in and one road out, and there's a lot of fuel, and if we ever have a forest fire, it's gonna be bad.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff we want to hear, and that's exactly the input, and we did a lot of access egress work out in some of these other communities where we've already done this. That was a major, the other big thing, because people usually, they'll look at me and go, what do you think we should do, right? And I'm happy to provide that. I'd much rather do that than in a community setting when fire is bearing down on you and everybody's all mad, going, what are you gonna do about it? What are you guys gonna do about it?
Right, there needs to be a plan.
So that's kind of that's what we're getting at. That exact stuff, access egress, defensible space on private property is a big thing to initial attack firefighters. Then we go into usually fuel breaks, shaded fuel breaks. There's other methods out there. Yeah, we got 16 month schedule where we're gonna try to complete all of these CWPPs. And unfortunately, those of us working on it right now very quickly are gonna have to focus on fire season. So we have a project coordinator that's gonna be hired shortly that will be continuing on with this effort through the summer with assistance from myself and maybe some other staff, just depending on the fire season. We gotta kind of prioritize that shortly.
So you have 10 communities you're either updating or creating new CWPPs for in 16 months, did you?
Yeah, so we started with Kenny Lake, and we've already started the process with Lake Louise, Crosswind, Susitna, Tyone country out there too, while we capture that seasonal crowd. So we're doing it, and, by the time we're having the second meeting here, we'll be having the first one out there. That's pretty accelerated, so. We just want to get the word out, want to get the feedback from the community, and then, just refine it in the next couple community meetings.
I anticipate our second community meeting, we'll be looking at the risk assessment parts of the plan. So right now, we've started the survey, and we're getting input from community members on their feelings on how defensible their space is and community preparedness for wildfire. And we're also gathering some of the materials I mentioned, such as satellite imagery and fuels maps and that sort of thing, where we can start looking at it with people who are fuel specialists and fire specialists, and start identifying areas that are at higher risk, and then present our findings in addition to the community input at the second meeting, and basically then we'll be looking for feedback on that and talking about potential solutions that could be applied. Do we have any online questions?
We do. So just about these, are there any funds available to provide for a chipper to get rid of big splash piles.
And I guess I would answer that when we did the WUI grant in Glen Allen and both McCarthy and Kennecott, we rented a chipper and we hired local non-perm folks, and they went around with the chipper and could do that. So we do have that option available. That would be it'd be separate from what we're doing now. That would be in a future grant to accomplish something defined. But that is available in the valley, and we've used it extensively. There's one available here. And then Ben, you might need to chime in on this one. This is from Morgan Gantz, and her question is, what would the process be to Firewise your home if it is adjacent to BLM land, and that would require cutting vegetation on public lands? And I can tell you what has happened before. I've been involved in some of these, not BLM, but Park Service, and they've allowed, that Firewise to extend onto federal lands. Ben can probably speak better to that.
Yeah, most definitely, BLM would consider, assess, and authorize removal of a reasonable amount of hazardous fuels that would be adjacent to a value that need protected.
Okay, those that might not have been able to hear them, that was, affirmative. BLM would be favorable to those discussions. Another one coming from BLM, from Marty Graham. Can you describe other types of mitigations that communities have done as examples to consider? We've done Firewise around, primary residence, that's a big one. We've done access and egress, thinning and improving and creating access and egress. We've done fuel breaks, both solid fuel breaks and shaded fuel breaks. So those are some other examples that I've seen be effective, out here.
Just a chain of what we did.
Yeah. And then another question from can roads be improved in the subdivisions? And yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we did with the WUI grant, following up on a CWPP in those communities. That would allow for better firefighting response for a subdivision. And can firewood cut out of fire breaks be made available to those in need? Absolutely. It primarily would be made available for the adjacent property owners, depending on land ownership of where that fire break may or may not be. And can funds be used to help with costs of clearing electrical lines in communities, neighborhoods, main lines? Certainly, if that's a concern of the community, spelled out in the CWPP, could be followed up with a WUI grant and coordination with the agencies, the electric company and those folks. All of those would be acceptable wildland-urban interface projects.
I had a couple questions from folks who took the survey. One of them said, I'm interested in learning other proactive things I can do. I have a well. Should I invest in my own sprinklers? Are there programs to purchase reduced priced items for home improvement as a preventive measure? And again, as we identify through the CWPP needs in the plan and potential resources that are available, that can later be followed up with the WUI grants that would help provide, say if there was a more remote area, such as out on McCarthy Road or down in the Teakle area, where the folks there identified and said, hey, we're kind of far out, we're far from a response, but we have a water source. Can we outfit ourselves with our own pumps and hose and sprinklers to provide protection for ourselves? That is definitely something that a WUI grant can help make possible. And then, the other.
Especially through the fire department, also the VFA grants.
Another question, if owners have more than one property, can multiple properties take advantage of programs? And I would say, of course, because we're not trying to limit anything. In fact, the more people who participate, the better off we're all going to be. Do you have any questions, Andrew? Go ahead.
What's your best way to find the actual ownership of the land? For instance, my subdivision has got land on the far side of it, and I have no clue whether it's currently federal, state, or native across the back line of the subdivision, and where do I go to find out that?
BLM will have land status. A state agency would be able to provide you that as well, but the Bureau of Land Management would take a request to assist you by identifying adjacent landowners.
Okay. I'm trying to do that.
And then, I don't know if you have access to the internet, but if you look at, say, the OTMA page, it also has maps of its land ownership there.
Well, yeah, I have access to internet, and I think when the subdivision was originally put in, they called the land across the back line to be federal. But then, if I understood it right, the state top filed on a bunch of stuff, and then they were arguing with the natives who got what. The natives haven't put up any no trespassing signs along the road frontage of that, between our subdivision and the next subdivision, but I kind of wonder. I mean, I'm not afraid to cut totally dead wood that's right on the border, because that's everybody's advantage, and there isn't that much of it. But you know, I can drive a four-wheeler down my line, but that's about as wide a fire break I've got there. I've cut all of the potential stuff on my side of the line. I didn't cut all the live trees, but I've cut all the dead wood and brush, so.
And there could be several reasons why the native corporations haven't gone back there and put up posting signs, etc. For example, it may be selected but has not been completely adjudicated to the corporation at this point. But if you wanted to give me a call at OTNA, for example, we've got pretty good land maps that can tell you exactly who owns what as well.
Okay, you know, like I say, I'm just curious, and I don't want to get into trouble. I know if it's state land, I can cut dead wood for firewood, which would also reduce fuels. But I don't know about other people's.
I give you permission. You can have it all. The water filter needs to be cleaned, so the water's back up. Anybody has to use it.
Oh, great, thank you. Wesley, did I see you had a question back there?
So for fire breaks around this area, are you guys thinking about collaborating with, say, OCNA and Chittenden Corporation? Because they have a bunch of land right around this area that's just off the highway and right along the side of the highway for possible fire breaks for preventative measures.
Yeah, any sort of fuel break or fire break, shaded or otherwise, would definitely require collaboration with other land management agencies. And from my perspective, where I see some pinch points where I would like to see a fire break to isolate communities, and that's kind of our goal, is to try to isolate communities. So I'm looking at a pinch point between like this community and Copper Center, and that would include multiple jurisdictional agencies. If that's something that the community thinks like we need, you know, is supportive of in this plan, yeah, that would be discussions with OTNA for sure, and the state,
any jurisdiction within the planning area.
Yeah, any landowner in that area. I'm not saying that that couldn't happen, because I think there's some interest, on everybody's part to see, these communities protected, so it would just be a process, yeah.
Right.
And from Monda's perspective, we're always willing to have those conversations. We partnered with AITRC for some fuel breaks in the past, and we generally run everything through Mike. We've got a pretty open line of communication, so, yeah.
Right. Well, we had that Chesterton fire, 2 years ago, and then, luckily I was actually on the phone with forestry with Benjamin, 2 years ago, and we had that fire up at Dust Creek.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no houses over there, but the fuel that's over there is, you got big timber, it's really dense, and our prevailing wind usually comes around the mountains and heads down that way, so Kenny Lake essentially would have been sort of in the path. I mean, there's the Tonsina River that was right there too, but, it easily could jump the river and would have been in our back door, like.
That was over the 2019.
Yeah, 2019, yeah. Like I said, luckily I was on the phone with Benjamin, and within a half hour they were there, and it only got to a quarter of an acre, I believe. And they were dumping water on it and had 3 or 4.
Yeah, we just happened to be on another fire right in the same area with the helicopter, So people often ask, they go, when's the big one? When is that gonna happen? And the truth is, nobody knows. And, so what we wanna do is do what we can before, we know that that's pretty good likelihood, hopefully not before, or I retire, but, so that's what we wanna do. We just wanna pre-plan and do as much as we can in these communities around here, before we need to test that system, really.
Efforts put into prevention pay off in the long run greatly.
What is a good definition of a fire break? Like, how wide? And volunteers on both sides?
It's 1.5 times the height of the tallest field type. That's a good rule of thumb that we use in forestry. And it's not necessarily, that's gonna stop the fire, but it's gonna change the fire behavior. What we're trying to do, even in defensible space around your home, we're trying to get a fire that's in the canopy, a crown fire, or something that we can't contain down onto the ground, where we can do something with it. And a fuel break gives us a line where we could potentially do some backfiring operations and whatnot. That's really what we're trying to do, is get it, down where we can get to it.
Yeah. And the maps with the different fuel types, is that available online?
Not easily. Let's put it that way.
We are working on
So,
that, though.
for instance, this is a public site. It's a DNR maps, ArcGIS, and we've started layers on it that are including our CWPP boundaries. And the background I happen to have up here is the satellite imagery. And so the best thing you can do is on this map is like zoom in and actually look at the fuels and see, and then sort of ground truth it by like, oh, I know what mile and such. I know that there's spruce trees there, and I know off the Edgerton on this side, or the old Edgerton, there's more aspen trees, but it's hard to exactly ascertain from this map. Agencies have all these studies and databases stockpiled away somewhere, but it is hard from a public perspective to just get on the internet and Google it and get it.
Well, to look at
Same with
things-
ownership.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we have them, but
We can't tell you.
they're not always easily accessible.
Well, and it looks like there's a lot of stuff that's gonna be beetle killed within the year, and that'll make it even worse. You ride into Glen Allen and you can see the trees that are starting to brown down in a lot of places.
And the lightning's changed a lot in the last 20 or 30 years. 2019 was the first year that we had more lightning-caused fires in the state of Alaska than human-caused fires. And it appears that lightning's on the uptick.
So as a community, what do you guys want from us? So we're with the league and also on the fire department with the administrative board. So what can we do to move forward with this? What would you have us do? We have a meeting coming up. Could we put it on the agenda and get a vote to yea or nay, or you tell us what you want us to do?
So starting off, everyone in the room can take the survey, contact us directly with questions and concerns, either through email, telephone, or the papers we provided, and provide input. Secondly, organizations such as the League and the Fire Department will benefit just from kind of staying along with the planning process, so that you'll be aware of the areas we prioritized and identified in our community as needing hazardous fuel reductions. And as the plan plays out and we obtain for it and help people have access to the programs that we have available. Yeah.
I was just gonna, share my perspective. I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm happy to see the turnout. It's typical of candidate communities for a lot of people to show up, and I think that's great. In response to your question about what the community can do, I think, by showing up here tonight, you guys have expressed an interest in this effort to plan and go forth trying to make improvements in protecting all values. And really, during this planning efforts, it's important for us to be engaged ourselves, but also entice and enroll other people to become engaged and provide input. The more people that can contribute, the better the plan is, and likely the duration of the plan. So as forestry schedules their more meetings for this Kenny Lake, Willow Lake effort, it's great to talk about it in the community with your neighbors and really, become champions of, any success that we're going to get out of this CWPP plan. But, it's really a 2, 3, 4 year, as we look out, the first year and a half might be planning, where you can glean all that input and really solidify a plan. And then from there, that really opens the floodgates for funding opportunities to do the actual work. And like they've said over and over, it's agencies can perform the work with smoke jumpers or hot shot crews or manual label there. You can contract out with a cruise construction or masticator to go up and down the highway and create a huge project. You can engage with other partners, tribal entities, state entities, and private industry to apply for money to accomplish those priorities that you've identified in your plan. So it's exciting. It's a big chunk that the Division of Forestry has bitten off here in Copper River with 10 plans. But I can tell you that across the state throughout the roadless rural areas of the state, we are seeing an increase in funding to accomplish these plans so that all Alaskans can do what they can to protect their values. And we talk about a defensible space. What is it? You might have 3 zones, 30, 50, 100, or 200, but it's not just your home that defensible space needs to be around. It should be around any identified value, and that value can be cultural and historic. It can be under the ground. It can be an outbuilding on all your outbuildings. It could be communication towers, other infrastructure identified. It's great that, to see Kenny Lake on the forefront, statewide on, some of this planning stuff.
So it's really complicated.
Actually, it's not. One of the goals is to not make it overly complicated. Yeah, thank you for that input.
If I could just add to what Ben was saying, I mean, and the more, I hate to sound all kumbaya on everyone, but the more togetherness on all this stuff, the easier the process is, and, the faster, quicker, better things get moved forward. So I realize we all have different interests, but in this sense, we all have kind of the same interests, so keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and to add in on that, as my perspective as an IC, as an incident commander, as one of the guys in the engine decides up fires and everything, there's the two main causes that start fires. There's human cause and there's natural cause. Natural cause, it takes a little bit more time. Human cause, it gives us a little bit more of a idea of what we have to work with when it's in the wildland-urban interface. So, one of the type of questions that we want to know is how many people use burn barrels in this rural environment. One of the causes that starts fires is the burn barrel, unintended. That's why we have the burn barrel, the burn permit. As long as those guidelines are met, you're not going to have any problems with anything with the fire starting. There are things that does occur. If you're burning a burn barrel during a windy day, something could happen. But also, it's just making sure that everyone has the proper burn barrel. Because I personally use a burn barrel in my location where I live in Copper Center. But it's just to make sure that as long as everything's abided by that guideline, you're not going to have anything. Make sure there's gravel in the burn barrel. There's a grate on top of it so that nothing blows out, etc. And that's one way of stopping anything from contaminating to other people's properties if a fire does break out. There's ideas that I thought of as a grant to where forestry would build. We used to do, we've done it before, where we build burn barrels and give them out to the community. And that would also give us opportunity time to go out to the community, get to know you guys, also give you advice on your property at the same time, so kind of hit two birds with one stone. And these are just ideas that we can try figure out and try to get a grant for, to be able to help the rural community burn safe, etc. Through our guidelines.
All right, well, I think we'll bring our meeting to a close, and then if you have any other issues or comments or questions you want to ask us, we'll be available.
There's
after the meeting.
one other question from Morgan out here online, just asking, would resources such as DOT be brought in if a big fire started? And really, we're going to utilize anything that we have available to us at the moment. We do cooperative agreements and operating plans with the fire departments, and yes, we definitely would use DOT if we needed to. And so yes, we'll take everything that we can get our hands on in those situations. And then Peter Biskind, what is the best contact we as landowners can send proposals, suggestions, concerns? I think the best one is our email, right?
Yeah.
So that would be the dnr.dof.bcra@alaska.gov. I'll put that in this chat column. Can you go and that's all the questions online. Thank you guys all, and we'll be around if anybody has anything.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve, for coming.
Take care, John.
Their season starts on Sunday.
Get out already?
Yeah. Spring season.
Oh, yeah. Cool.